It's our second ever Substack Live.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, and we're talking about the farmer's paradox, is what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, last week, for those who missed it, last week, Adam and I got on here and we talked a lot about some of the challenges that farmers are facing, including, Adam, you talked so eloquently about some of the mental health challenges and what that's like to live through it, what it's like socially, the pressures on farmers these days. So if anybody's interested in that discussion, we'll link to it and you can check it out. It was a really, really thorough discussion. We also talked about just diving in and doing things and learning from that experimental
Yeah.
participation, shall we say. Yeah, but today, Adam, you and I shared some back and forths on a note that we saw on Substack. And I'm going to start off with reading that note. It's a quote. So the author was a Substacker named Justin McAfee. I don't know him, but I love this note. So I'll link to it in our published version as well. And he runs a Substack called Collapse Curriculum. He wrote, Mark Maron, and Mark Maron is a comedian. Mark Maron says it well. Depression is a reasonable response to what's happening. Because what's happening is industrial capitalism shredding the living world in real time. It's oceans hemorrhaging plastic and forests flattened for toilet paper. It's billionaires joyriding into space while billions rot in poverty on a planet they've helped set on fire. The world should weigh heavy on your heart. This culture is a death cult dressed up in LED lights and dopamine notifications. Civilization is not only unsustainable, it is based on violence, hierarchy, and systemic destruction. Every skyscraper is a monument to conquest. Every pipeline, a confession of ecological homicide. You feel that ache in your bones? That's your humanity trying to survive in a culture that teaches us to hate life itself, to hate the wild, to hate women, to hate our bodies, to hate feeling anything that isn't profit or productivity. And we wonder why so many of us are sick with despair. But that despair is not a flaw. It's your soul resisting. It's grief in a world that gaslights us into believing everything is normal. Depression isn't a disease in this context. It's a rebellion, a refusal to normalize the carnage, a sign that you're still alive, still human, in a machine that wants you numb, docile, and consuming until you die. So feel it, own it, and then let it guide you, not into apathy, but into resistance. Because this collapsing world doesn't need more spiritual wellness retreats. They need clean water, intact soil, breathable air. They need us to fight back. Whew. And
Yeah.
that was a quote from Justin McAfee on Collapse Curriculum. So, Adam, your response to that was, that's like a cinder block to a bare foot.
It is. It's a heavy message. It is, but I think it's everything we've been feeling. Well, I've been feeling for, I don't know, since I got out of high school 20 years ago. Not just in ag, but like everywhere. This slow numbing out of everything, just avoiding and accepting that this is the way it is. And um, I don't know, but yeah, you should. Resistance isn't always loud. Like I think what we're doing is exactly what he's talking about. Just bringing some light to this. Like it's not always just loud protests or a million tractors in the streets of London. I mean, that's part of it too, but sometimes it's just writing, talking, saying the things that we've never felt like we were allowed to say.
Absolutely. And I think you're a really good example of telling that truth.
I try to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets uncomfortable, but I guess I don't know, I feel like those are the places you need to go if you want to at least understand what's happening and then from there work to change it, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
but then what does that mean, work to change it? Because
I
uh
don't know.
right, right.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the main things that I want to talk to you about right now, why we're calling this the farmer's paradox, because from my perspective, what I see is statements like what I read, and how to put this, statements like that talk about ecological destruction, discussion about our bodies and lack of health. And there's this knee jerk reaction to blame farmers,
Hmm.
blame them, make them the scapegoat, that it's the farmer's problem that we have all this nutrient runoff into the bay. Because here I am in Maryland, right by the Chesapeake Bay, and on our eastern shore, we have tons of chicken farmers, and they're the scapegoat for all that pollution.
Sure.
Uh, and I think that is a bit of a paradox, because we're socially, societally, we're putting that blame on the farmers, and we're saying, okay, you fix it, you change. But then you point out over and over, what goes into that? What does that actually look like when you tell the farmers they have to change? And
Yeah.
share about that a little bit. You talk about the empty communities, but the depression, the lack of choice. So talk about that a little bit. Here's this paradox: the world is broken, farmers have to fix it.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to blame us just because we're 1%, like we talked about last week, and we're just we're just somewhere out there, you know. Farmers do stuff, but nobody. I don't know. It's almost like we don't exist. But yeah, when it comes time to blame somebody, it's us. But we don't talk about the people that are over fertilizing their yards without even taking a soil test to know if it needs fertility. That's where a lot of the runoff comes from. Whoops. From just Yeah, just that. People fertilizing their lawns, way overdoing it, and that runs off too. The point is it's not just us. And it's almost like there's this unwritten expectation for us to fix everything when at the same time we're not allowed to exist. We The only platform you typically see in ag, especially big ag, is these talking points like, oh, the family farmer, this Norman Rockwell image of America, and it's just not what it really is. And I think telling the truth is the rebellion, just telling it like it is. And it's uncomfortable, it's hard to do. It it makes you feel weird at egg conferences too. you know, the
Oh,
outcast,
yes, I do. Um, One thing to pull out from that is, I don't know why this came to mind, but what came to mind for me as you were talking is this consumer angle of things, and how we have food available to us all the time, endless supply of food, right? And I actually just wrote about that on my Substack.
That was a good piece,
The
by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let things be special, about this over availability of food all the time. And it
Yeah.
means nothing is special anymore. But related to that, Adam, is what I see as this acceptance of waste. And
Yeah.
when I plant my garden and then I harvest something from my garden, there's not a chance I'm going to waste that,
Right.
because I know the work that goes into it.
Right.
And so when I look at this paradox that, it's your job to change, it's your job to figure out a new business model. And last week we talked about this a lot, that you don't know, like, so many farmers are in limbo right now. You don't know where the changes are happening, or how to
Yeah.
adapt, or what to expect in the future. And I feel that, so it's so real. And so if we can come along as consumers and say, I'm not going to waste food, right? We're like,
Hmm.
really appreciate the human labor, the land, the soil that goes into producing food, we would not be so inclined to waste it.
Right. And I'm very guilty about that. Sherry's great, and she hates when I waste food, but even I just you don't even think about it. It's just I'll just get some more. It's become wherever it's okay to just throw anything away. And about the not being special, I think I told you about the Alberta peaches. They used to come to my hometown once a year for like a week, and I can't remember what her name was. Dodie. Dodie worked at the store, and she was just obsessed with these peaches, and they were great, But the cool thing about it was that they came around once a year, and then they were gone, and you got something to look forward to. It's the same with those little kiwis, the sun golds. They're a little sweeter than a kiwi. They used to come here for maybe 2 weeks, but now they're here all the time. I never even buy them anymore. lost their luster, and that's the case with everything. It's just abundance, dopamine addiction, like you said, like always more and more and more and more and more. And yeah, we don't let anything be special anymore. Hmm. I really like that piece. I think I forgot
Thank
to tell
you.
you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm.
The seeds of that were planted many years ago. I wrote
Yeah.
it in a different form and adapted it for today. Shall
Sure.
I
Yeah.
say. Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, going along that train of thought there, is that part of the resistance?
What specifically? The
Letting things be special again, letting them be
Oh,
scarce
sure.
enough
Sure. Yeah.
that we honor them and value them.
Yeah. Definitely. I think it is because we're not just joining the crowd, not just doing what everybody else does, and even even taking the time to appreciate that is being different and setting yourself apart. And yeah, I would say it's part of the resistance for sure. Yeah.
What else comes to mind for you when you think about that quote, that larger context of that piece, the world we're in, and ways that this depression, but I'm going to use a different phrase for it besides depression. I think it's fitting, but I think it's a longing. And there's something missing that we're longing for that we may or may not even be conscious of what it is that we're longing for. But what else do you think it is? And what else do you think is part of that resistance?
Wow. There's a longing for something for sure. People, I don't know. It's like I guess you feel that, at least me anyway. You always feel this nostalgia for, I don't know. I don't want to say the old days or how things used to be because I certainly don't want it to go back to the way it was in 1950. Our quality of life is much better. I mean, just thinking about living without the internet, my God. Um, oh my God, I'm getting off track here.
Well, let me challenge you on one thing you just said, which is
Sure,
quality of life. And I want to make a distinction between standard of living
that's
versus quality of life.
standard of living is probably what I meant to say. Yeah, for sure. Um, but yeah, there's just this. It's almost like you can feel it in all of wherever you go. There's just this something's missing, But what it is, I don't know. I mean, we're all trying to find it in our phones. It's like just trying to get away from everything, And I think it's just trying to fill a hole that I don't know how many. I can't even really explain what it is. I don't even know what it is. Hmm. I'll think about it for 3 days, and then something will finally click. But that's why I write because it gives me time to process these things on the spot. I'm just like,
That processing
yeah,
is really important.
yeah,
I
yeah.
find that too. And I'm working on processing thoughts around the lack of shared reality anymore. And
Yeah.
I'm processing that. I'm putting some of it to paper and trying to navigate around it because I think one of the things that we're missing that we don't even realize we're missing is a shared reality. And when you think about, like, I don't want to idealize any past time either. I think that that's not necessarily intellectually honest, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Um, and when I think about some of what's missing, it's like, can we fill that with things like seasonal food and gathering around a fire pit? And how do those shared realities, because it's then a shared experience, shared reality, how can that strengthen some of those things that we're missing right now, which is community and
Yeah.
having our basic needs met? That's another big, huge, important thing is that we're all stressed and distressed constantly because our basic needs are on the edge of a cliff all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. So many people are just struggling just to get by, and it's easy to numb out. It's easy to isolate, really. I mean, and it's not just us in rural areas. I think it's everybody. Like
Oh, yeah.
There's people don't have third places anymore. Have you ever heard of it? You ever talk about a third place? Like, you got home, you got work. What's your third place? Well, most of our third places are in the bedroom on Instagram or something like that. It used to be a pool. There used to be a lot more places you could go to hang out with people to have that community, and it's like there's no interest in that anymore. I mean, and myself included, it's so easy to isolate. You let this stuff get on top of you, and you sit and overthink it like I do, and perhaps you find yourself in a pretty deep spiral before too long. And I don't
Yeah.
know, it's really hard to overcome that, especially on your own. Not that I'm
Yeah.
on my own, but like you're with your own thoughts in your head most of the time. And that's how everybody is. So yeah, it's easy to go for that dopamine hit, just isolate, numb out, and go back and do it again the next day. And I think we've all gotten really used to that. And boy, it's really showing up in a lot of ways.
Third place. I really like that. It's
Yeah.
a concept I've heard before, but I have to say it's not regular.
Yeah, I'm
And
trying to think of where I've heard it a few times. My old friend Bryce used to talk about it a lot, but and then Scott Galloway, he's a good writer. He talks about it too. Third place, he brings it up pretty often because he has a lot of concern about young men, especially in this country.
yeah,
Just
I understand
no
that.
direction, no opportunity, no. So many things are changing. Like, our job's going to be here next year, 5 years, 10 years. What's that going to look like? I mean, there's just so much uncertainty. I mean, it's like we talk about the uncertainty in farming and policy and all that stuff, but it's not just farming, it's everywhere. There's so much uncertainty. We don't it's hard to move forward when you don't know what's going to happen. Like, it almost clouds your thinking in a way. It's like going broke. You can't think of anything but going broke, and you might miss opportunities, you might miss the way out or a way to fix it, all because you get so just locked into the problems. You forget to look for a solution. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Good.
Totally. Yes. And this one commenter says, live in the present moment. You can't do anything about the past or future, but you can make a difference by living right here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to remind myself of that 1,000 times a day.
Yes. And I think that that dovetails very nicely into exactly what we're talking about, which is that third space, right? Do you have a place to be with other people to do just that?
Right.
We did have fire pits, communal fire pits, more so than today, I'm going to say. We did have gathering places, big barns where people had big events. State
Yeah.
fairs were a different thing before. It was where communities came together, not where a bunch of strangers came together.
Right.
And it also dovetails into what I call having that shared reality. And I'll tell you a
Okay.
really quick story. Like I think that for one thing, because we're in so many different places, we have such a different reality. Like you last week when we were talking, you had 2 feet of snow on the ground, and spring was pushing on the door here.
Hmm.
So when you have a place in common, you have something of a shared reality. And so a few years ago, I think it was about almost 3 years ago, my neighborhood got hit by a really bad storm. It was like a tornado that maybe didn't come all the way to the ground, but
Hmm.
like hit all the tops of the houses and the trees. And it was incredible. Like it was horrible and destructive. Nobody got seriously injured or died or anything. So in that regard, it was a blessing that it wasn't worse. But afterwards, for a few days, we all had a shared reality.
Right.
We had
Right.
that storm, we all experienced it. We were all navigating impassable streets because enormous trees fell down. And that brought us together in a way.
Yeah.
But when we don't have shared spaces anymore, like the third space, we miss some of that.
Yeah. And that's the
And we don't
scary
even
part.
know we're missing it.
Right. That's the scary part. It takes a disaster to get you to realize what it's like to come together as a community, as a people again. Yeah. Huh.
And,
Interesting.
I think that's an area where you write so eloquently, Adam, on your Substack. farming full time. For those who are not familiar with Adam's writing, please check it out. It's incredibly poignant and relatable. And you do such a great job explaining some of that emptiness, but also how to repair it and what's going on in communities like your broader community where people are leaving in droves, and what's left for those who are still there.
Yeah, thank you for the compliment. Um, yeah, I talk about it a lot. I wish I had more on the solution side. I feel like I spend a lot of time just describing the problems and trying to show what they're like. But yeah, I really wish I had more on the solution side of it. But like in our situation, it's you just there aren't a lot of solutions. When we just don't have the people, we don't have the economic reasons for them to even come here and start to rebuild it. I mean, sure, there's an appetite for farming out there and agriculture among young people, especially, but is that going to translate into people coming back to our small towns and reversing the population decline that I've seen my whole life for sure, longer than that? I don't know. I hope it doesn't take a massive disaster or cluster F to get us to come together. I I don't know. Again, it's easy to slip back into that negative thinking and like this is going to end badly. But in the end, I'm optimistic that we will come together. But what's going to do it? What's going to bring us together?
Yeah, I
And that's
agree.
what scares us, right?
Well, I agree with you on in the end, I think there's going to be something that brings us together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the scary part, right?
Did we talk about it last week being apocalyptimists?
I don't think we did. No.
I love that word. It's such a great word. It's like, yes, the apocalypse is happening, and yes, we can do something about it and get through it. So, apocalyptimist. That's how I think of us. Because I think, Adam, we're looking at this like, yes, it's happening. We see so much evidence of what you're describing, what I'm talking about. And yet we're like, something is going to bring us together. And when it does, I believe that enough hands will come together to solve and to create a different future. I do believe that.
Huh.
It might be a while, it might not be in my lifetime, but I
I
do
don't
think
know.
that there's something to hope for in the long run.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm optimistic, even though it seems bleak now. But no, I'm very optimistic. But you're right. There's probably there might be some rocks in between before we get to that point. But do you ever read the Fourth Turning books? Neil
I've read
Howe.
some articles on it. I don't think I've read the
Those are
books.
those are pretty good books. They talk about like generational cycles and how
Hmm.
these cycles repeat. Like it's a
Can you
big
give a
super
brief overview
a
of that?
super cycle would be like 80 years. So 80 years ago, the fourth turning always culminates in a crisis. So we're kind of at that point in history. If you go back 80 years, we had the Great Depression, World War II. 80 years before that, the Civil War. Before that, the Revolutionary War. And on it actually goes through history. Some people might argue that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't know. And Neil Howe does such a good job. He breaks down the differences in generations, like the differences in how we raise kids, how we connect with each other, the community we experience, and how that changes throughout basically every 20-year generational cycle. It's a fascinating book. I would highly recommend checking it out. The Fourth Turning. I think it's Neil Strauss, Neil Howe. Strauss and Howe are the last names. I can't remember both of their first names, but anyway, I think about that a lot, and I feel like that's where we are, and there's this tension, like just brewing everywhere in ag and society, and I mean you see it all over. Did you see the wheat farmers? I'm gonna bounce all over the place, but did you see the wheat people and the wheat people in the UK? They're
Yeah.
sitting on their wheat. They're on strike, and
Yes.
this is part of it too. But that's part of the resistance too. It's just it's all these little things. But anyway, it's just this tension, and it feels like that tension needs to be resolved. And what it is and where it goes, I have no idea. But
I
it's
did
something.
see the wheat thing, and let's talk about that for a minute because
Yeah.
I go off in a split thought pattern on that. One is absolute cheerleader, like, yay, they're taking charge, they're taking ownership, they're doing that thing, which is making a change. And I see a lot of potential in that and a lot of hope in that. And then the other side of me goes, uh-oh, UK is just going to import more cheap wheat from someplace else and
Right.
screw their farmers over again.
Yeah.
And that goes back to this farmer paradox, right? Because here we have, and it's such a great illustration, it's mirrored in the UK and here we have farmers who society, can I just be really broad here, is demanding that you change. Don't put chemicals on anymore. Change your diversity practices, change your farming practices, soil, rebuild your soil, blah, 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 on and on and on. So a bunch of armchair quarterbacks, right, are telling you how to farm, telling the
Right.
whole industry how to farm without recognizing what it takes on your end.
Right. Right. It's
And that's where your stories are so important, Adam. So important because here's society going, go organic, be regenerative, do this. And you're like, this is what happens when you force something on farmers who are not prepared.
yeah.
And it's so real and visceral. And I think about the dairy farmers here out east so often and how the desire to change is there, even, but they can't without losing everything, literally.
Right. Right. And just a lot of times the capital, the money that it takes to make these changes is prohibitive, especially in a economy now. We're in survival mode. We're not going to make
Yes.
any changes at all. We're gonna do what's worked in the past to get us through these periods, and that's what we're gonna do.
Yes.
And change doesn't come without incentive, especially for farmers. I mean, you really have to incentivize people to do something different, to change. I mean, and we will, but this whole industry, farming, is just one giant experiment year after year. But you only get one try a year, and I always come back to this. You get 30 at bats in a career, and that's it. And nobody wants to be the guy that loses it. Nobody wants to be the weird guy that made some change that maybe doesn't work out, and then they lose the whole farm. And then, well, that guy's a legend in the whole county for the rest of the time. Like,
Yes.
it's just how it works up here. That stuff sticks with you, and that's why it's so hard for us to change. Just all those reasons: the capital, the lack of at bats we have, all those things make it extremely difficult to change. And then on top of that, it's like telling a kid no. The more you tell them no, the more they want to do it. So we get so many people telling us, you need to change, you need to do it this way. Well, eventually it's like, you know what? Screw you. I'm not even going to listen to anybody. I'm just going to keep doing my thing.
Yes.
I think. I don't know.
Farmers do have an independent streak, don't they?
Little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's this expectation that you're going to assume all the risk.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's not realistic.
No, it's not. I mean,
Society's saying farmers make the change, but we're not saying we're going to come along with you. We're going to buy your product no matter how much of it there is. We're going to support you by fundraising for the equipment you need. We're going to come alongside you in other ways through community building, making sure that, hey, if it doesn't work, you have a place to live and farm and be. Like, we're not coming along in that way as a society.
right.
It's just this constant, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is just this constant pressure to do better. It's not good enough. You have to change. You have to take all the risk. You have to make all the sacrifice and keep feeding people.
Yeah. And then still somehow sleep at night
Right.
with all this stuff.
And
It's
if you're not sleeping at night, that's your fault too.
yeah, yeah. You deal with that too. Yeah, man, but yeah, it's just how do we name the real enemy, instead of just farmers are the scapegoats. And who is there an enemy? I mean, I don't think farmers are the enemy. I don't think consumers are the enemy. I think the enemy is a system that demands silence and just tries to keep the status quo. Compliance, I mean, yeah, that's the real it. I mean, doing nothing and saying nothing and just accepting it and moving forward. I think that's the invisible enemy, if you will.
which might also be an ideology.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Hmm.
That has multiple threads, but
It
people
does,
can
yeah.
extrapolate that from that what they will.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we talk a lot about the get big or get out ideology that
Right.
brought us where we are now, and how those ideologies are formed. I mean, I know a piece of it, but there's bigger pieces that I don't fully understand how those ideologies are formed and then adapted to and stuck with. But I think we are seeing, Adam, back circling back to solution and what is that revolution and resistance. We are seeing a resistance to the old ideologies that got us where we are now. We are seeing new ideologies coming out about the importance of community and basic needs being met and farmers actually getting paid a living wage. They'll take time, right? It's not going to be overnight, but maybe there's a point of hope in that. And then on the consumer side of things, oh, I don't want to open that can of worms right now. But what do you say about that? The ideologies.
Well, I don't think you're going to like what I have to say, but I think farms are going to keep getting bigger, and we've opened that can of that box is open, and I don't think you're going to shut it. And now with South America producing as much as they are, they're going to eat our lunch, and small farmers are not going to be able to compete. People will argue with me on this, like this down cycle in commodity prices right now. Yeah, it's just another blip. It's a cycle. Egg is cyclical, and it is. But I don't know. This doesn't feel like a typical egg cycle to me. This feels like we're standing on the precipice of this enormous change, and I think a lot of it goes back to South America and how we can't compete. And if you're a small farmer, you're not going to be able to compete in commodity production. And then we got the average farm age is 58 years old. Another precipice. They're all just waiting to let go, but I don't think they want to because they all talk about how it feels like the only people left out here in our small towns are the vultures waiting for them to die so they can take the damn land. So they're hanging on for dear life, but when they let go, there's going to be this massive shift. Where is all this land going to go? I can't afford it. Most people can't afford it. It's going to go in the hands of bigger operations. Those are the only ones that'll be able to compete with the South Americas, the Argentinas, the Brazils. So yeah, I don't see it going where a lot of us would like it to go, like back to, hey, you and me could go farm if we wanted to start a farm. I don't know if we'll get back to that or not, but well, that was kind of depressing going there.
I mean, it's real because I think if we don't identify the problem,
Yeah,
how can we possibly get to a solution?
right, yeah,
And that's a good point of clarity, Adam, because if I'm over here all idealistic that we're in a cultural shift of ideology, and you're like, actually, we're not, and here's what I'm seeing. It's important to note that because otherwise, how do we even touch the problem?
right,
How do
yeah,
we resist it? Because we're talking about this paradox of resistance and the expectations on farmers. So if we don't identify what's real, we just pretend, that doesn't help us either.
right.
But I hear you. Like this, people coming into this can hear it as depressing and fatalistic or nihilistic. And I don't think it's that either. I think it's like really getting down to what is the problem, which, let's be clear, there's multiple problems.
Oh yeah, tons, yeah,
But if we identify the problem we're tackling, we can then tackle it. We can then resist it.
right. Yeah, not nihilistic at all. I mean, it sounds like a bleak, bad outlook, but I think it's just the reality of the situation. That's the first thing you have to do is admit the reality of your situation, right? In order to find the problem and move forward and find solutions, right?
What does that
But
mean for food security? For the average American, shall we say?
I don't know. I really don't. This goes back to all the uncertainty. Like, I don't know I
Yeah,
don't know, what does the grocery store look like in 5 years? You know, consumer demand will dictate that, but where is consumer demand going to go? Especially in a world where we don't know what's what, up is down, left is right. It's such a confusing time that how do you, I don't know, maybe that's the way they want
maybe, but
it.
I
I
do
don't know.
have one teeny tiny micro solution.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And it ties together food security and land use, shared realities, health. It ties it all together, and that is greater participatory production. So we've talked over and over about how only 1% of Americans are actually in the agricultural industry. That
Hmm.
means 1% of Americans, it's actually a tiny bit over, but roughly 1% of Americans are producing all the food consumed here and exported
Hmm.
and processing it. That includes the meat processors, which is hardly anybody.
Right.
And if many of us participate through planting a small garden or learning to preserve food or learning to harvest or supporting farmers in what they're doing,
Right.
participating, right? That is participatory production. And that means that we're going to have that shared reality of hands in the soil. What does it take to grow something? What does it take to milk a cow? We'll have that shared reality again and a common language, a common experience. We'll have that vested interest where, when I go out and help milk the cows in 10 degrees, I'm not wasting a drop of that milk, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I know what went into it.
Right.
And there's that level of appreciation as well. So if we can call ourselves to that, we have a greater capacity to have all of those things, all of those solutions, while at the same time, a greater chance of our basic needs being met.
Yeah. I agree with all that. It's a great solution. How do we get people to want to do that? And maybe people do want to do that already. At least a lot of the people I meet. That's one of the first things people talk about is healthy eating, healthy food. I told you about the construction guy that was going to give me a Gabe Brown cover crop or a
Yeah.
no-till. He's like the cover crop god. I'm like, who? The construction guy is offering this to me? It just seems so strange, but yeah, I keep going back to this. There's an appetite for something different, and I think you're onto something with it. I don't know. Sherry and I are going to grow a garden this year. I haven't done that in 5 years, but there's something different about it when you put your own sweat, your own labor into it. It means something. It's more. Let it be special, right? Yeah.
And it's
And
that thing we're missing that we don't remember that we're missing. I think
right,
where
right,
I live, right, which is in the suburbs right outside of DC, there's such a disconnect and it's a generational disconnect. And every once in a while, when I talk about these things and my own garden and to and somebody maybe my age or older, I get this response, this reaction like, "Oh, I remember growing a garden with my grandma
yeah,
every summer." And so there are shreds, not shreds, threads of these shared memories that they know what they're missing. But for people, I think a lot of people my age and younger, there's no memory of it.
right, right. I don't even know.
And it's about helping them. Part of what I do is help them bridge that gap from, oh, I don't know anything about this, I can't possibly do this, to, oh, I can actually do this.
Yeah, it. Yeah, if people knew how, I don't want to say easy, but it's easy to start and it's easy to try. It's harder to fail. but you have to put yourself in a position to at least try and be willing to fail. But I don't know. I do think you're onto something that if people just experience that, something as simple as growing a piece of their own food, like how much that could change and snowball, like one person talks to another and pretty soon there's a whole group of friends doing it or something. So that gives me some optimism and I like where you're thinking that.
Well, in my community here, a few years ago, I don't remember. Time is just morphine these days, but
Does.
somewhere between 7 or 8 years ago, something like that, my city started a community garden. And
Hmm.
it was, it's your typical, it's the side of a baseball field and it's fenced off and it's got 20 plots.
Hmm.
Some of them are 8 by 8, some of them are 8 by 5, whatever, right? Very structured, very like methodical.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago, there was such a long wait list, they created another plot.
Oh yeah.
And this year, there's a third plot. And I love that. I love to see that. And a few years ago, and these are just a couple of anecdotes, right? But it does show that people are shifting, that our society is shifting. So a couple of years ago, there was a sorority that had purchased one of the community garden plots. And they took turns coming out. So none of them had any experience gardening. And they were taking turns coming out. And they were growing in the whole plot sweet potatoes to then donate to the food bank. And it's great. I mean, when you're talking about people being willing to learn, I think that's fantastic and awesome. And I want to encourage everybody, no matter what your level of experience, don't be afraid to ask dumb questions because
Yeah.
we've all been there. We've all been there. And nobody can know it all,
My
right?
dad, my dad always says dumb looks are still free. So something like that.
That's a great way of putting it. And, some of the questions that they asked, like, what does a carrot top look like?
Yeah.
What does why, like, they were asking me about the sweet potatoes. Like, is this a sweet potato? Like, the whole thing was covered in sweet potato leaves and they didn't know. Or one time, I don't know, I don't remember when this was, but I was planting radishes with somebody and they were unsure if one radish seed was like a tomato plant that would produce a lot of radishes. And I told them, nope, one seed, you're going to get one radish, you're going to
Hmm.
get the greens, then you're going to plant more. But even just having that basic understanding, like being able to identify a few plants,
Right. Yeah.
know what to expect when you put that seed in the ground. Ask the questions. Like, it is okay if you have never done this before. Ask the questions.
Right.
And to you also, I mean, you could probably give entire novels on what's worked, what hasn't worked, what do different wheat seeds look like, when to plant them, how to know when the soil's ready, what temperature the soil needs to be, all of these little details that can guide. And you and I, we talk about experimenting and just doing it and seeing what happens, but
Yeah.
we also have continue to rely on the guides that have gone before us. And now
Oh
we
yeah.
are some of those. We are
Yeah.
guides to some people. Anyway, talk about that. That's enough from me.
Yeah. Even though we experiment, I mean, we're all following a playbook of some sort, to at least get. We've all got a basic framework that we follow, but yeah, it's tinkering with that and trying to move it forward. Wow, you covered a lot there. I'm not sure where to.
It was a bit of a rant. Sorry about
No,
that.
that's okay. I'm trying to figure out where to. Yeah, just trying. I mean, just. And you mentioned the community garden. I just realized it's the same in Grand Forks here. There's a booming one. I think it's full actually. Somebody was saying the other day. But yeah, same thing. There's no shame in not knowing. There's no shame in having to ask. And not to mention, there's unlimited resources available for you. You know, you can easily learn all this stuff. And a couple bags of dirt and you're off. You know, especially up here, our soil's wonderful. You can just drop stuff in and it just grows. We've got some of the most fertile soil in the country. You know, but
You know, I asked
yeah,
somebody the other day, we were driving along and passing somebody unloading bags of soil from the back of their truck. And I asked him, I said, what do you think the native tribes would have said 400 years ago if we'd told them that people were going to be transporting soil in plastic bags from one location to another? Yeah, there's always that coming up too, right?
yeah, yeah, that must look weird. I mean, if from that perspective, like, what are these people doing? Oh man,
It's such a different paradigm.
it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Always so much to think about. Where to go? Such a complicated topic. I know I say this every time we talk, but like, where do you? Sorry, lost my train of thought.
Hey, it's all good. I mean,
Yeah,
it's all part of the seeds being planted, right?
yeah, yeah.
But you know, somebody did have a comment here. Let me read this. It says, Kevin says the seeds produced by one year's harvest feed many of next year's gardens.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If that's one area where I want to get better, which is seed saving and reusing.
Hmm.
And Adam, you're part of a seed company, right?
Yeah, we actually grow spring wheat seed, soybean seed. Soybean seed is GMO. I know that's kind of a no-no in some circles, but yeah, we grow that and clean them and then resell them. Um, I'm actually thinking about growing oats.
Okay.
The economy's got us doing weird things, and you know it's strange when you bring up oats in 2025. But got
Why?
a couple friends growing. It's just such a we've done stuff the same way for so long. It's been wheat, soybeans, sugar beets, and now the economics have us trying to figure out. Well, all these things look terrible. Wheat looks terrible. Soybeans look terrible. Instead of trying to find the least terrible thing, why not try to find something different that you can do to win? I mean, we've thought about growing, I don't know, anything we can grow up here to try to make a dollar so we can stay in business, you know. But yeah, it's people are starting to get creative now. It was a pretty quiet winter in the seed world. Not many people wanted to talk about it at all. And how do you get excited for a year where it looks like, hey, you're going to lose more money this year, you know? So
Mhm.
I don't blame guys for dragging their feet, but it also brings out now this last minute surge of creativity. Like, okay, what can we do to try to make it? Those are the farmers I respect the most, the ones that'll do something different, go out on a limb, take a chance, even if it is something weird for your area. And I think that applies beyond just farming in my area. It's everywhere, right? Even the person willing to throw a couple seeds in their backyard and try to grow a cucumber. I don't know. But it's that's what keeps us moving forward is that appetite to keep going, you know? As cliche as that sounds.
It does sound a little cliche, but
Yeah.
in the context of our bigger question of here's this the farmer's paradox and the expectation on the farm to adapt. And I want you to touch on that because here are these farmers being creative with no certainty that what they're changing to is going to be profitable either.
Right, right. And I guess we've got crop insurance to fall back on, subsidized crop insurance, but who knows if that's even going to be around? I mean, every government department is getting slashed and burned. Do you think we're any different? I don't know. They, I saw this guy talking at a Sugar Beet show last week. This talking head, just trying to gaslight us into believing that all this, what's happening, is good for us. Oh, these tariffs are going to be great for you. You just got to hold on a little bit longer. Like, okay, thanks. Meanwhile, I'll be a bullet sponge in your trade war. I mean, and we got to take the hit for all this, and then we still got the risk of growing the crop, and we got drought to worry about, regulation, and we're told we should be grateful. Like, what is happening right now? Like,
What is happening?
what is happening?
Oh my word. Yeah. If anybody listening, if you have any comments or thoughts, please share. I'll read it out loud. We can talk about it. You can tell us what you're seeing, especially if you are farming. What are you seeing?
Yeah. And I don't mean to make it all political, but how do you not? And it's not red and blue, right and left. It's just, what are we doing? Like,
What
what are
are
we
we doing?
doing? So many ways. What are we doing? I have to force myself to write lighter pieces sometimes. Like, I got like 7 or 8 things ready to go, but they're all just heavy, and it's about stuff like this. I'm like, you can't keep hammering people with all this heavy shit. So I'm trying to. Got a cute piece about the farm toy show that I was at this last weekend. So you need that lightness, to try to just woosah.
I totally get that. And it's so hard to communicate about this, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, what Helen and I talk about, Helen is Helen Freeman on Substack, Me, My Pigs and I. She talks about what's going on in the UK, and we mirror each other a lot. We talk about food security. And, on the one hand, I'm like, hey, we're all doomed if we don't do something different. And on the other hand, I'm like, that's not very inspiring.
Right.
So I always want to inspire. And yet, I also really see a very likely possibility that things are not going to change until we're forced to,
That's
through lack or prices that are so astronomically high that most people cannot afford certain foods,
mhm.
or such extreme ecosystem collapse that we literally can't grow certain foods in certain places, or the pollution gets so high in areas that that land is unusable. So I struggle with that too, Adam. I'm like, I am such an optimistic person. Like, I'll be the first to tell you, like, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm also like, hey, but we have to do something different. We
Right.
have to try something different. But then that comes back to the paradox that we're talking about right now, because, like, yeah, I want some farmers to change their practices. I want to see less herbicide. I want to see more organics and local production and people supporting local farms. But I don't believe that's all the farmer's responsibility. I believe it is also
No.
the consumer's responsibility to step up and say, we've got your back.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you're exactly right. The consumer will ultimately shape what we grow. I mean, and the consumer's mind changes with every goddamn Netflix series that comes out. Like, how are you supposed to keep up with what the consumer wants? And it kind of ties into the availability of everything. Like, we have everything at our fingertips. How do you? Is it going with this? Yeah, it's just there's so much uncertainty even with what the consumers want. So where do we go with that? What do we do? It's like it's all put on us. Like, you figure it out. When we're just following the market. Like, if the market wants wheat, we'll grow wheat. If it wants soybeans, we'll grow that. But where am I going with this? I have a point somewhere here, but
You always do. You always get back to it.
eventually I find it. Like I said, it might be 3 days later and something I'm writing, but yeah, it's I don't know. I think
It
it
is.
goes back to the most radical thing you can do is just tell the truth, talk about it. And if enough people know what's going on, the rest will follow, in my opinion.
That being said, yeah, I want to add a word of caution and a word of intentionality, I think, to it, that the most visible or the most talked about people or processes are not always the most applicable. I don't want to be cryptic, but I also don't want to get like open a whole nother can of worms here. But all that to say, like, you discuss this a lot in your writing, Adam, that there is not one solution. So wherever, like, the most visible solutions, the most talked about solutions, regenerative farming, whatever else, whatever other greenwashed terms there are right now,
Sustainability, regenerative, yeah, all that
you
stuff.
cannot necessarily apply the same standards to every situation.
No.
And even if you do apply those standards to different situations, you cannot expect the same results. So that's my word of caution, is that with every bioregion, with every ecosystem, with every different familial situation, there is a different solution. It's not all one size fits everyone.
And it's very, very localized.
Very localized.
Yeah, like I've been on 26 different farms I've worked on in my life. 26. Like
Wow.
whether I was just pinch hitting and helping somebody with harvest for a day or bouncing around trying to figure my life out. I've been on 26 different farms and not one of them are the same. And this is within a 200-mile stretch up and down the Red River Valley for the most part. Every single one of those is different. There is no one size fits all. And that's only adds to all this complication that we always talk about. Like there is not one solution for, and that's just, I don't know, it's hard to wrap your head around that. You know? Like you want to write up a bill or pass a law that applies to millions of different little microclimates, I guess you could call it. Little
Yeah. Yes,
unique,
exactly.
unique. Every little piece of land is unique. Everything. There's just so many variables. How do you isolate it? How do you come up with a one size fits all solution? That's for people sharper than me, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and that's why we have the 10th Amendment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one commenter said, actually, Doug says, hammer your legislators with it. And I don't disagree. I think policy is huge. It's a very important piece of this larger puzzle. And so is participatory production.
Yeah.
And Jake just joined. Jake GC. Hi, Jake. I know that he comments a lot in our pieces. So just a quick shout out. And to everybody who has joined us, thank you for joining. It is so good to see you all on here this morning. I know I speak for both of us when I say that.
Absolutely.
Some of this gets lost in the scroll. So if you want to say hello, please do. We love to see you. We love to see your hellos. And thanks for joining us on this Tuesday morning where we're talking about really complex stuff and the paradox that farmers are facing.
I was going to be mobile for this today. I told you last week I was going to be at the farm to do this, but we're getting some weather moving in. We're getting another snowstorm tomorrow. So spring is on delay again. So maybe next week I seem to be able to process my thoughts a little better when I'm tootling down the road or walking around and not just sitting in my office. But
that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
That's
well,
especially made for that. This is the unusual thing. Sit in one place, sit really still for a long time. I don't do well with sitting still either.
Yeah, it's like my brain fumbles and trips over itself, and all this pressure on yourself to be perfect. You know, when it's like, does it really matter, Adam? Good grief, take it easy.
Put some seeds in the ground, right?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to, but it's
it'll
be a couple weeks now. It looks like, which is probably fine. Usually, when we plant this early, it doesn't usually work out that well anyway.
What is the first crop you're planting in this?
Usually, like the only thing I would plant right now would be spring wheat. It would be the only thing I would dare put in the ground. And I don't know, in about 2 weeks, I would put sugar beets in the ground.
Can you define what that means, spring wheat?
Spring wheat planted in the spring, harvested in the late summer, early fall.
And that's different than winter wheat.
Yeah, and I think most of the wheat in America would be winter wheat, so planted late fall and goes dormant over the winter, and then they'll harvest I think that would be more midsummer, depending on where you are. Usually Texas would probably start in May, and then Oklahoma June, and you just kind of work your way up the Midwest. And thinking of yeah, I'm thinking about how the custom combine guys will drive down and custom combine. They'll take 4 or 6 combines down, and they'll start in Texas, and they'll just work their way up to the Dakotas and into Canada by September. So
Will they travel with a combine?
yeah, they haul them on trailers,
Oh, wow.
combines, carts, and a whole crew of workers. And yeah, it's
Wow.
pretty common thing.
What are the qualities, or are there different qualities between winter and spring wheat?
I've never grown winter wheat. I know with spring wheat, our spring wheat is hard red spring wheat, and
Okay.
the biggest thing with that is protein. We want to grow high protein, and if we don't,
Yeah.
we get killed at the market. And it's for every percentage point of protein we lose, it's $1 off.
Oh, wow.
And we're starting at like 5.50, so you don't get a lot of dollars off.
Yes.
Last year's
Five
protein was
$5 and 50
five
cents
$5.50, yeah, per
per
bushel.
bushel.
Yeah, yeah. So for every 60 pounds of wheat, $5.50. But last year, after discounts, after we had some quality issues because it got wet in late July, and that's just a breeding ground for disease, fungus, all that stuff. And we had some wheat we got $2.40 for in the end.
Oh my gosh.
Doesn't work. It costs about 5.50 to $6 to just grow an acre of wheat.
So, Adam, I'm going to say a little bit about what I know about the different types of wheat as a home cook and
Sure,
baker, occasional baker. Baking is not my favorite. And then can you fill in the gaps and what it's like, what you know about it as a farmer?
sure.
So, my limited knowledge, there's red wheat, which is the high protein that you're talking about, and it's
Mhm.
mostly used for bread baking.
Yeah,
Then there's, and I believe the red wheat can be either spring or winter.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Then there's hard white, and hard white wheat is slightly lower protein, and that's really good for things like pancakes, cookies. Well, never mind, not cookies, but pancakes. Some rolls and mixed with hard red, it can be like that all-purpose flour that
mhm,
we see in so many recipes. And then there's soft white, and soft white is much lower in protein, and it's what is very famous for pastries. And so, of course, not of course, but in some cases, when it's sifted and turned into what is commonly termed white flour, that means it's sifted and after milling, the wheat germ is sifted out. Did I get that about right?
I think so. I'm kind of learning from you now, actually. I don't know much about like the soft whites or the hard whites. We don't grow any of that. Like soft white, I think is a big Pacific Northwest crop. Um, there are so many different wheats, and I don't know. I'm a hard red spring wheat guy, and that's what I know the most
Okay.
about, to be honest. And as far as the baking quality, I don't know. I just grow it. So,
Yeah.
but
Do you ever get to use your own wheat?
could. Well, I do. I get to regrow it next year because we grow our own seed, but
Okay.
actually use it for food? No, I never have. Be interesting.
That might
Be
be a
fun.
fun little experiment.
Yeah, to make some
Yeah.
bread. Yeah,
Well, Adam, we've covered a lot in this
yeah,
session, more than I even thought we were going to, including that little ending anecdote on the different types of wheat.
yeah.
Uh, any closing thoughts? Any final thoughts?
I don't know. I don't know. Just tell the truth. Say things that we're never really allowed to say, and I think that's what's going to get us through this. I don't know if that's great advice, but it's something.
It's important.
Yeah.
And once again, where do people find you to read some
Substack, farming
stories?
full time. I try to put out a piece every week. I got a farm choice show one coming out here, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I still have to read the voiceover, but try not to follow such a hard schedule. I used to publish every Tuesday, but it gets to be a lot of pressure on a guy. So I just kind of
It is. It's a
took
ton
a
of
little
pressure.
took a little break. I'll still try to get something out weekly, but it's not going to be a hard deadline. But yeah, it's all talking about stuff like this, trying to figure things out, and encourage people to do the same. But yeah, Farming Full Time, Substack. Check it out.
Great. And of course, I am Raw Milk Mama on Substack. I talk about food security, food policy, a little bit about the personal side of things. And yeah, we do these occasional conversations.
Yes.
Thanks to everybody who tuned in this morning. And we'll be back.
Yeah.
Look
Been
for the
great.
next
Thanks.
announcement.
Thank you.
All right, Adam. Catch you soon.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.